Hi, this is Wes Terasaki. We're continuing our series on the Gospel of John, and this session will cover the 9th chapter. People may think of John chapter 9 as the story of the healing of a man born blind, yet out of its 41 verses, the actual healing is described in just 2. Then all the rest of the chapter deals with the repercussions of this one event. This passage is not primarily about how Jesus can heal a physically blind person, but about how he heals the spiritually blind. And it is about the reaction of different groups of people to this miracle of God. Jesus and his disciples encounter a man who has always been blind. He was born that way. Never has he seen the beauty of a sunset, the faces of his parents, or even the food that he eats. He lives in a world of literal darkness and a future with little hope. Now the disciples don't seem interested in helping this guy out. They're more interested in an academic discussion on whose fault it is that he's blind in the first place. It was widely believed by Jews that suffering and illness were caused by sin. Was his blindness due to specific sin by the man or by his parents? Jesus says it's no one's fault, and he proceeds to give the man sight by applying a mixture of spit and mud to his eyes and then having him wash in the pool of Siloam. This all happens on the Sabbath, no less. For the man, this is a venture of faith. He's never met Jesus before and takes him at his word. Jesus never tells him he will be healed, but the man travels a considerable distance to wash in the pool of Siloam, and he is rewarded with miraculous healing. Before we go further, let's go back and take a look at verses 3 and 4 before the healing takes place. In the NIV, they read, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus, "but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me." The question might be asked, did God deliberately cause a person to suffer with blindness for many years, just so one day his power to heal could be displayed? The passage as it is written seems to imply this. I think there are two things to say here. First, God may not cause all suffering, but he does allow suffering in this world. At the same time, God is able to overturn and redeem tragedy, such as a boy's blindness, so that when the child grew up, he would experience the powerful grace of God that leads to eternal life. This is part of the mystery and sovereignty of a just and wise God. A second interpretation comes from a literary understanding, and it may help us. The words, "this happened," are not actually in the Greek text. They were added by the NIV editors. In addition, the early Greek manuscripts of the New Testament were not punctuated. So it is possible, and some scholars think it likely, that there is a full stop after "said Jesus." The verses would then read as follows. "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus. "So that the works of God might be displayed in him, we must do the works of him who sent me as long as it is day." Read this way, the emphasis is on the importance of doing God's works while it is possible, that is, while Jesus is still on earth, not on the reason for disability in this man. As we read the Gospel of John, we see how it is structured around 7 miraculous signs of Christ. This healing is the 6th. But amid the miraculous acts of Jesus, we can miss the uniqueness of this particular event, the restoration of sight for a man born blind. How many times was someone cured of blindness in the Old Testament? 0. How many times did the apostles of the early church heal the blind? 0. In fact, did anyone in the Bible other than Christ ever give sight to someone blind? The answer is no, with the possible exception of Ananias, who helped restore vision to Paul in Damascus. But you could say Jesus did that too. What healing miracle is Jesus described as doing more than any other? Giving sight to the blind, which he did numerous times in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. How many times has a person blind from birth been given the gift of vision? Once, and that is the man in our story today. In the aftermath of the man's healing, we see 4 different categories of people with 4 very different reactions to what happened. They are the neighbors, the parents, the Pharisees, and the man himself. Let's take a look at each. The neighbors are confused. Some are not even sure this is the same guy they knew from before. How could you not recognize someone who you've been around for years? Well, if you think about it, perhaps the reaction is not so far-fetched. A person who opens his eyes, looks around, focuses, makes eye contact when he never did before, and moves around with a confidence he never had before, can look physically like a different person, at least for a while until his friends get beyond the externals. The reaction of the neighbors and friends is one of ambivalence. The parents are cowering. This is a somewhat peculiar reaction by the parents. They are not overjoyed at their son's healing. They are not excitedly telling everyone what happened. No, they are intimidated by the Jewish leaders and choose to be entirely non-committal in this matter. Their overriding concern is being kicked out of the synagogue. Then there are the Pharisees. They are contentious. The religious leaders of Jerusalem may not have heard of Jesus turning water to wine or feeding the 5,000. After all, these happened far off in Galilee, and the popular cliché was nothing good comes from Galilee. But now 2 spectacular healings have occurred right in their city. The curing of a lame man, 38 years an invalid, and now the restoration of sight to one who has never seen before. How do the Pharisees respond? With wonder and awe, with thanksgiving? No, they are again hung up on the idea that the event took place on a Sabbath. No matter that a man was healed of a lifelong disability, they wanted to know how it was done so they can accuse Jesus of breaking their Sabbath rules. There were those so firmly in the grip of darkness that they saw only a technical breach of their law and could not discern a spectacular victory of light over darkness. They disputed with the man and in the process revealed their inward blindness. Insisting that they were disciples of Moses and rejecting Jesus, they go from spiritual blindness to even greater spiritual blindness. In the end, Jesus has to tell them that because they claim to see, they are all the more responsible in their darkness, all the more guilty in their sin. The neighbors are confused. The parents are cowering. The Pharisees are contentious. But the man is conforming to the likeness of Christ. From the moment he sees the light, he begins to grow in boldness. He becomes a witness to the power of God. He stands up for the truth, even though it gets him expelled from the synagogue. He displays an increasingly forceful tone and strength of character. He grows in wisdom and spiritual insight. The man first identifies Christ as the man they call Jesus, then a prophet, then he is from God. And ultimately he goes from one who sees nothing to one who recognizes Jesus as Lord, and he becomes a true worshiper. In fact, he's the only person described as worshiping God in all of John's Gospel. Note that while this illiterate man is ascending in faith and knowledge of God, the educated Pharisees are spiraling downward in unbelief and cynicism. His last words to the Pharisees are impressive in their depth and challenging to their foundations. Now that's remarkable. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly person who does his will. Nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. When God appears to people, some who know they are blind see the light. Others who think they see are blinded by it. Recall that John chapter 8 presented Jesus as the light of the world. What difference does that make? Well, we've now seen in the very next chapter that Jesus prophetically plays out that message by giving light to a blind man. When that happens, people have a decision to make, don't they? Like the neighbors, we can be confused and ambivalent about God's power. Like the parents, we can cower in the face of opposition and be afraid to commit to Jesus. Like the Pharisees, we can be arrogantly contentious with God. Or, like the man who has experienced Christ's healing touch, we can be conformed to the likeness of Jesus Christ, growing in our witness, knowledge of God, and Christian character. Spiritual vision or spiritual blindness, a choice we each must make.